Hey everybody, Cole Sands here again with your weekly fishing report. It is November 22nd, 2021, and we're going to talk about what's going on the lake right now. The water temp is 50 to 57 degrees, just depending on where you're at, and it's been fishing pretty good. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. This past week guiding, I'm the type of person, I like to throw a frog, as long as I can. As long as there's any grass left, I like to throw it. So last week we had some good days on a frog. Caught them doing a couple different things as well. But a lot's starting to happen on the lake. I'm seeing a lot of fish starting to set up in different places. They're starting to get ready to go into their winter mode. There's fish that have been eating them little thread fin. I'm noticing are starting to eat some bigger gizzard shad. So there's some cool things happening right now, and some things that kind of make me excited in these weeks going forward. So for starters, I've been throwing a frog a good bit. There's not a ton of grass left, but there is some. And usually with a frog, these colder mornings that we've been having, you have to wait till the sun gets up on them, usually at least 11 o'clock, 11 or 12, and then from 12 till dark, it's usually pretty good. Last week we threw the black frog some, we threw a small white frog. They both seemed to work really good. I wouldn't say one was any better than the next. Now with that being said, as this grass begins to die, these mats start getting washed away, there's usually some sparse grass still left. Stuff that you can't really throw a frog on top of, but you might be able to wind a chatterbait through, you might be able to wind a rattle trap through, stuff like that. So to do that, I'm getting on the edge of these grass lines. Maybe it's the main lake, maybe it's back the creek, so it just depends where you're at. But I'm getting on these places where there is grass and, I don't know, let's say 2 to 4 foot of water, and I'm positioning my boat off the grass. I don't want to be sitting on top of it. I'm positioning the boat off the grass, whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8 foot of water, depending on how steep the break is. I'm going to sit off the grass and I'm going to throw up to it. And to do that, I'm kind of using 2 or 3 different baits. One's a 1/2 ounce chatterbait. I like a shad color. I just, personally, I'm not saying a red rattle trap or a red chatterbait or a red rattle trap or something like that wouldn't work. But when it comes to chatterbaits this time of year, I like shad. Maybe you like throwing a brim color one. It might work. But I personally like a shad colored one, whether it's clear water shad or green shad. There's a million different color combinations. So that's one thing I like to do a lot on them grass edges. And then probably my all-time favorite is throwing a Yo-Zuri Rattling Vibe on the edge of the grass. This is a little 3/8 ounce size right here. And this time of year, I'll kind of start transitioning between a 3/8 and a 5/8, the little bit bigger model that Yo-Zuri makes. And what makes this particular rattling style bait, I think, a little bit better is it's got a really unique wobble when it shimmies. And I've seen in multiple instances where you get more bites on this compared to a different brand. I ain't gonna say it's in every instance, but the colder it is, the more a Rattling Vibe seems to perform for me. And I've heard that from several different people. It's not just my opinion. But this time of year, I like a shad colored one a lot. That's kind of a translucent colored one. That's one of my favorites on Chick. This spring I whacked a bunch of big ones on the next size up to 5/8, but that same color. That's a good color, that they make a lot of different good ones. I'll start throwing a red one usually about this time of year as well. Usually December rolls around, the water temp gets colder. I feel like fish are starting to eat more and more crawfish, and I will also I usually have a shad color one tied on and a red one as well, just so I can try both. And usually one, depending on the day, one will work better than the other. But usually it is this time of year when the red one starts to play a little bit. But one thing I like to do when I'm fishing grass edges, which is what I do this time of year with the rattle trap, I'll throw it out there and I'll rip it out. I'll rip it out and I'll reel it down. Almost like you're yo-yoing it out of the grass. And to do that, you almost have to have a rod that's sturdy enough to do it. But the problem with a lot of rods is they're too stiff. And you'll get a hook in the fish and the fish will pull loose because the rod's too stiff. With a crankbait style bait, you need a rod that you can really play the fish. What I like to do is get a Witch Doctor Tackle Sermon Series rod. This is a 7.2 medium heavy. But the cool thing about this rod is it's half glass and half graphite, which is the perfect rattle trap rod. It's also a really sweet chatterbait rod. But the reason it's a perfect rattle trap rod is the graphite gives it the strength to rip out of that grass, no problem. But the glass gives it that playability. When you hook a big fish, you don't have to worry about pulling the hooks out or straightening a hook out. That rod will play the fish for you. and your landing percentage will go way up. You know, a rattle trap, you do lose fish on a rattle trap. That's just a fact. But with this rod, I've lost way less. Just trying to help you all out. If y'all get the chance to check these out, they're sweet. And this is the only rod I throw a rattle trap on. Hands down, the only rod. But yeah, you know, that's something I definitely target this time of year is a rattle trap, a chatterbait, and one more bait I will throw on the edge of grass this time of year is a jerk bait. And a jerk bait is good this time of year for multiple applications. You don't have to just fish grass, but I like to throw that Yo-Zuri jerk bait on the edge of grass, and I'll rip it down until I get in it, then I'll snap it loose. But I'm also throwing a jerk bait this time of year on transition points. You know, maybe these fish are leaving the creeks, maybe they're moving back into them. So if I'm fishing, let's say there's a point, I'm gonna pull it there, I'm gonna throw a jerk bait. Maybe it's a creek channel bend in a creek, or the channel swings up against the bank and there's a bunch of bait in the area. You know, a jerk bait is a very, very, very effective bait in the wintertime. The only other bait I'll say might be any more effective is an Alabama rig. I mean, I'll still say they're neck and neck. So starting now and going through probably April, I will have a jerk bait tied on when I leave the house. I can guarantee it. And it catches really big fish as well. And you know, shafts start to die off this time of year as the water gets colder, and nothing mimics it quite like a jerk bait does. Usually if I'm fishing around grass, I'm fishing a little bit faster, but if I'm fishing, let's say creek channel bends, ditch mouths, stuff like that, I'm gonna fish it a little bit slower. And the colder it gets, the slower I fish it. You know, I've won a couple tournaments when there's ice on the edge of the lake, and you gotta almost pull it, you're fishing it so slow, and you're letting it sit for 10, 15 seconds. But I definitely have a jerk bait tied on. So those are 3 really good baits for fishing the edge of grass, you know, that sparse grass that will be left. And some of it seems like it always stays throughout the winter. Besides that, I'm starting to see some fish already getting on their wintertime holes. You know, I said that earlier, but, you know, I'm starting to see some fish on bluffs. And as the winter goes on, I love to crank. You know, maybe you find some natural rock, you find, you know, some kind of a steeper bank, something like that. I love to throw a crankbait. And right now with the water being clear, a little Yo-Zuri 1.5 3dB and real crawfish is a killer because it's not super bright. It doesn't look abnormal. You know, it looks just like a crawfish coming through the water. And that's the color I would throw right now. If I'm going out tomorrow, like I said, I've already started to see some fish in the bluffs. They're already getting there, which kind of surprises me. But I guess that water temp has gotten cold enough. So that's when I'll throw. Now, I love cranking in the wintertime when we get some rain and it muddies up. And when that happens, I'm switching more to a solid red color, you know. That is also a small Yo-Zuri crankbait. And, you know, if it's muddy, I'm throwing a bright red or even a chartreuse. If it's clear, I'm going to throw something that's more translucent. That's just usually what I do. But I love to crank, you know, and it's something I almost always have tied on in the wintertime as well. Besides that, you can't leave the house without an Alabama rig this time of year. There's a lot of applications for it. Now, I like it on the edge of grass as well. That is a bait you can fish on the edge of grass if you can kind of keep it on the edge. But also, you know, as some fish get in them deeper creek channels, them creek mouths, stuff like that, an Alabama rig is very effective. You know, it matches them balls of bait, and, you know, it's always been a killer in the wintertime. Now, I will tell you, if you start seeing fish that are you know, maybe they're too shallow for an Alabama rig. Let's see if they're less than 3 foot. What I like to do is I'll tie on just a single swim bait. This is a little true bass, 3.5 inch swim bait, and I'll just put it on a small jig head, like an 1/8 ounce goat gambler jig head, something like that. And, you know, an Alabama rig, you're gonna have a really hard time reeling it in less than 3 foot of water because you're gonna pick up grass and leaves and all sorts of stuff this time of year. But you can get by with that little 1/8 ounce head and a little swim bait and fish it a little bit shallower. You know, fish on Chickamauga, there's typically always some fish to be caught super shallow. It doesn't seem to matter how cold it gets. There's always fish to be caught shallow. Besides that, you know, if you're in an area where you think they're seeing an Alabama rig a lot and you think they're just super pressured, I'll also kind of switch to that just single swim bait. It seems like pressured fish are more likely to eat that one swim bait than they are that Alabama rig sometimes. And then last but not least, if you like to throw a big swim bait, there is a big swim bait bite starting to happen right now. That's the Hardcore Ninja Glide from Yo-Zuri and Hardcore. And I caught some big ones on this last week. I got some big followers. The water temp is perfect. Usually when I throw it, I like the water temp to be between 48 and about 63. And it's like, you know, it's like 54, 55 right now in a lot of places, which is like the most ideal you can ask for that bait. Now it's one of them baits, you're just gonna have to pick it up and you're gonna have to throw it. I can't say go run points or go run bluffs. You could catch fish doing, you know, running anything with a glide bait. You just have to pick it up and build confidence with it. It catches big fish, and it just, you know, you might go for a couple hours without a bite. You know, that's part of it. But usually the size, you know, you're rewarded with the size of fish you catch with it. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. You know, I look forward to this winter. It should be a good one. It seems like the biggest fish on Chickamauga always get caught in the wintertime. You might not have the best numbers day, but you know, you might fish all day and you catch a 10-pounder. You know, it might be the only fish you catch, but that's what Chickamauga is known for, you know, is that giant fish. And hopefully a couple of these things that, you know, I talked about today will help y'all. And good luck in the water, guys. Thanks.